is, man. We ain't about to panic. Ain't no need to be nervous. It's a fight. It's a 7-point ball game, and we get the ball first. It's a fight. Go out there and fight.
Gives it to Love, running left, tripped up, stays on his feet through one tackle, muscling and strong.
Oh, he scored!
He's in!
Oh my gosh!
Touchdown, Notre Dame! Jeremiah Love would not be denied! Aller throws, loose ball, intercepted! Christian Gray picks it off! Notre Dame will get the ball back!
Irish Nation, welcome to the show. I'm covering this one solo as we wrap up the transfer portal season here with Irish Talk's thoughts on all things portal as Notre Dame makes 7 acquisitions in the transfer portal, shoring up key places on both offense and defense positions of need. Definitely getting shored up. Definitely another positive portal cycle here for Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff. Let's drive right in to our thoughts here on the portal. First and foremost, I think very often roster retention gets overlooked when looking at portal rankings, and so much input is put onto who did you get. And especially in the NIL era, roster management, retaining your players, getting those NIL deals in place for your existing contributors, so critical. Notre Dame had 14 outgoing transfers in this cycle, and realistically, only one, maybe two if you squint, is a real-time contributor for Notre Dame. That's defensive end Josh Burnham. He is going to Indiana, a place now that 2 cycles in a row has taken a Notre Dame contributor. Obviously, last year took Pat Coogan, helped them win a national title. Congrats to our favorite 1-2, Pat Coogan. For those that know that reference, I will leave out the rest of that phrase for our under 18 listeners. And so Josh Burnham here was in the rotation, but certainly wasn't breaking through like a lot of folks thought. I think got stuck in the rotation by guys like Boubacar Traore. Knew that he was going to continue to fight for reps with guys coming up like Bryce Young or 5-star freshman phenom coming in, Rodney Durham. So Josh Burnham takes his services elsewhere. Other than that, everyone knows Kenny Minchie lost the starting job to CJ Carr. He's not going to make it next year. He's off to Kentucky where he's expected to start. Really pumped to see him land in an SEC program and get a chance to play, but didn't really play any meaningful football for us this year. Carson Hobbs, who got some playing time early in the season, frankly, was a big mismatch in our losses against Miami and Texas A&M, fell out of the rotation for the younger guys like Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, just never got back in the fold. He's off to Florida State. After that, I think we had a lot of hope for Jabron Payne. He's had a lot of injury issues, winds up at Cincinnati, never really broke through in the running back. Ben Minich, I think a lot of folks thought could elevate at safety, but with the likes of Adon Schuler and Tade Johnson, never really got meaningful snaps. KK Smith was a pretty highly touted wide receiver. He's off to Michigan State. Again, just never broke through the room. Like, just not a lot of contributors are leaving. And I think that's a really healthy sign for this program that the guys that Freeman wants to keep, we are figuring out the financial packages to keep them. At best, we lost one role player in Josh Burnham. In this era where players can leave whenever they want, they can go and shop for the highest bidder. If they don't like their position coach, they can go elsewhere. If they want to follow their position coach, they can go elsewhere. For a guy like Mike Mickens, I guess he's off to the NFL, but there's a lot of reasons why players might want to leave. And I think seeing only 14 exit, and of those, only one contributor, that to me is actually the biggest headline. The one that's not being talked about the most is just roster retention. And then I think the overall message is that Notre Dame is bringing in the number 3 class in terms of transfers plus undergrad recruits. So we're the number 4 recruiting class according to 24/7. We're the number 11 transfer class. And when you look at who does both really well, that puts Notre Dame at number 3 overall talent coming in. That is a game changer. It has been a long time since Notre Dame could say we are top 3 in bringing talent into our football program. This isn't a recruiting show, but Freeman says we're going to major in high school recruiting. We're going to minor in transfer portal. And I think a lot of people are like, you can't minor in transfer portal. You got to do both really well. I think what he really means is we're going to take 30 plus recruits every year and we're going to fill our areas of need. So we only have 7 incoming transfers, but they are high impact at our areas we need the most help shoring up. Defensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback are 6 of the 7 positions. 6 of the 7 positions, 6 of the 7 transfers are at those 3 positions: defensive tackle, cornerback, specifically the nickel, and wide receiver. And so I think we're minoring to round out the rest of our roster while still developing most of the talent from within. And the strategy is working. Absolutely proves that out with that number 3 overall ranking from 24/7 on the Transfer Portal Plus recruiting class. And then before really starting to get into the guys that we brought in through the portal, because I think there's some really great headlines in here to dive into. But I think the biggest narrative is that the transfer portal is so changing. It feels so rushed. It's down to a 2-week window. It's rapid fire. Guys are taking interviews. They're getting offers. We're not getting a chance to sign them. And everyone is freaking out. Like every beat writer was freaking out, and very intentionally, Irish Talk was silent. We didn't chime in the middle of the portal because these things take time. The players need to be assessed by the staff, and everyone can sit and say, whoa, what do you mean we never got a chance to make an offer to Nick Marsh? Everyone's assuming Nick Marsh, the wide receiver from Michigan State who now transferred to Indiana, everyone was assuming he was top of our board, that he was the number 1 guy we were going after. We don't know that. Look, Marcus Freeman didn't put out a statement that said, here's our top 5 choices, and if we don't get them, we're going to be bummed. And we wound up getting what I think are 2 really high upside, highly talented guys at wide receiver, both coming over from Ohio State, a place that has churned out NFL talent at wide receiver. And this big, we must be failing because we weren't in the early wave of recruiting out of the transfer portal. I think everyone's just got to take a deep breath. And it's always in that time of the year where it's between bowl games. There's not actual football to be watching. So everyone's just freaking out because there's nothing else to focus on. And I think Freeman completely validated himself when looking at landing the number 11 overall class, knowing we were only taking 7 guys. The classes that are higher were taking 20, 30, 40 players. The number 1 transfer class was LSU, where Ole Miss is bringing in 40 players out of the transfer portal. So they're ranked really highly on quantity, not necessarily quality. Freeman is playing the quality game in the transfer portal that requires patience. And the other thing is, we're not working with an unlimited salary cap. I think so many people react to headlines like, how do we let Indiana outbid us for Nick Marsh? And it's like, well, we don't know what the number is. We don't know exactly how much Notre Dame is spending. But we know it's not $100 million. We know it's not $50 million. We know it's probably somewhere in the $20 to $30 million ballpark. But at the end of the day, the bank account isn't unlimited. We aren't playing Monopoly. These are real dollars that are budgeted to the athletic department, to the football program, by the university, by boosters and benefactors of the university. And it's not unlimited. So yeah, if it's like, hey, we have to get 2 wide receivers and we have $800,000 to spend, and Nick Marsh just went for $790,000. Like, okay, like he's off our board because we can't afford him. We don't know how much Nick Marsh made, but I think folks are in this world where it's just like, why can't we get every player if we just outpay the next school? But every other school is saying that. And so at the end of the day, the dollars do become finite. And Marcus Freeman isn't just trying to convince players to come, but he's playing an NFL general manager role where he also has to manage his resources. He also has to manage, how far can my dollars take me and where am I going to allocate that money? I think he did an awesome job in this. If you go back to the first week of the portal in early January, Notre Dame land was freaking out that we weren't getting any transfer commitments. Patience, cooler heads prevail. 2 weeks later, the resounding feedback on this Marcus Freeman portal class is that it was an absolute success. So let's dive into that. To me, this is controversial. Not everyone's going to say this, but to me, what is the biggest get in this class is the 2 5-star talents from Ohio State at wide receiver by names of Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. Absolutely massive hauls in the sense that this is a program that has produced the likes of Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Chris Olave. Like, they have recruited at such a high level. When we previewed the national championship last year, we were talking about how they had 7-8 wide receivers that were all higher recruits than our best wide receiver. Like, they had cornered the market. And now in the NIL era, one of the things I love about it is the parity that is coming. Ohio State cannot hoard the 8 best wide receivers in the country. Teams like Indiana and Texas Tech and BYU and Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech all had amazing program-defining years, and it brought parity. Notre Dame is also one of those beneficiaries where, sure, we might not have that big, public school program donor base like in Indiana, but we clearly have the benefactors lined up to go out and pluck talent from Ohio State. By all accounts, they were bidding on Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. They did not want to lose these 2 players. It was a bidding war. ND won their services, and in they come. And the watch out is that these guys are not proven by any stretch. They've played very few snaps. They've been backing up the best wide receiver duo in the country in Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. But Mylan Graham was the number 59 recruit in his class. Very high-end 4-star commit. And Quincy Porter was the number 31 commit in his class, a 5-star talent. 6'4", 210-pound frame for Quincy Porter. Projects out wide. Playing that, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, Malachi Fields, Bo Collins, that role is where Quincy Porter projects. And again, I want to compare it to Nick Marsh. Everyone was saying, hey, why didn't Notre Dame get Nick Marsh? That was the guy everyone is talking about. He's the wide receiver out of Michigan State. He has the most returning production. Well, guess what? These transfer portal rankings, they are so subjective in who's the best or who's not. In fact, on both On3 and 24/7, Nick Marsh wasn't the number 1 receiver. He wasn't top 5. He was number 6 in 24/7. He was number 10 in On3. Likewise, Quincy Porter isn't the unanimous number 1 pick, but Quincy Porter was the number 2, I have this wrote down, was the number 2 wide receiver in On3 and the number 12 wide receiver in 24/7. This is a guy that's a 5-star. He's clearly wanted, but we don't have playing tape on him. Like, we've not seen this guy play because he's been a backup at Ohio State. But what we do know is he's an exceptional talent at wide receiver. And so that we got to trust the coaches that are evaluating these workouts, evaluating the tape they still have from high school, evaluating the workouts when we're bringing Porter and Graham on campus. But this is game-changing blue chip talent at wide receiver that Notre Dame hasn't had in a while, to go along with the likes of a Cam Williams, to go along with the likes of a Micah Gilbert. I just think a big time deal for Notre Dame now to be collecting blue chip talent, along with a ton of the experience we bring back in Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, etc. That's now starting to look like a loaded room from a talent perspective, something we haven't been able to say. The caveat, he doesn't have Bo Collins production. He doesn't have Malachi Fields production. Neither Graham nor Porter can say that. And so this is more a headline on talent than it is a headline on day 1 productivity coming in. Let's go to some of the others. Defensive tackle, pretty darn big position in need with Donovan Heinisch leaving. And obviously over the last few years, you're also replacing guys like Riley Mills and Howard Cross. And so we go out, get 2 guys in the portal, Francis Brewu, from Pittsburgh, has played a ton of football. I'm just looking this up again, believe he's a 2-year starter in his 2 years at Pittsburgh. Not a big like sack production guy, very much considered a run stopper, but was one of their best defensive players for a pretty darn good Pitt team. And then we also go out and get Tion Gray. Again, highly touted guy out of high school, was in the rotation at Oregon. He's in the transfer portal, winds up at Notre Dame. 6'6", 336 pounder. So again, another run stopper. On top of that, not a transfer portal news, but certainly big news for the defensive line. Jason Onye was granted a 6th year with his medical red shirt from the NCAA. So we are also getting him back. Again, defensive tackle. If we didn't get Jason Onye back, you're losing Heinisch. It felt like that room starts feeling pretty thin. Francis Brewu and Tion Gray, big time pickups here out of the portal. And I'm just looking this up, at least according to 24/7 amongst the defensive line rankings. Tion Gray is the number 3 pickup and Brewu is the number 8. So 2 top 10 pickups at defensive tackle. I think that's another big headline area of need. I think a position that was looking pretty thin. Next on my list, I'm going to Keon Keeley. Notre Dame fans should know this name well. A 5-star defensive edge, pass rushing specialist, 5-star out of high school, committed to Notre Dame a couple cycles ago, and then decommitted, went to Alabama in the Nick Saban regime, stayed through that coaching change, and now back in the portal. And I'm not saying he was a bust for Alabama fans, but he never turned in to that dominant pass rusher they were expecting. He did have 3 sacks this year, was certainly in their rotation, had some big moments down the stretch. So starter, contributor, however you want to define that, but not sitting here saying he's like an all SEC guy. But sophomore, multiple years of eligibility left. We've seen this time and time again of guys that, are getting, a few sacks their freshman, sophomore year and start breaking out junior, senior year. Keon Keeley certainly fits the frame, 6'5", 280. Again, comes with a blue chip recruit. Setting him in a same scheme where he's rotating with Abubakar Traore, Bryce Young, like that just starts to feel like a nasty defensive line. Real high-end potential to be a big contributor in the pass rush. And again, I think in the past we were talking about, development project who way over exceeded expectations at Duke and comes to Notre Dame as a grad transfer. Now we're talking about getting 5-star talent out of Ohio State, 5-star talent out of Alabama. That's a very, very different narrative than what the transfer portal has historically been for Notre Dame. Keon Keeley could easily turn into an absolute stud. And I'd be sitting here a year from now saying, what do you mean I had him as the, third position group to be talking about behind wide receiver and defensive tackle? Like Keon Keeley's our best defensive player. Like he's that level of talent. We were super bummed when he decommitted. Awesome to see we're still going to get his services here with 2 years of eligibility remaining. All right, last position group, cornerback. I have this one last because we already have Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Dallas Golden, and Mark Zachary. That is, by all accounts, the best cornerback room in the country. But we add to it even further 2 big pickups. Jaden Sanders from Michigan. This is a guy that was a top 150 recruit. So again, taking blue chip talent from Michigan. That's a game changer in the portal. He's a guy that has multiple years of eligibility left. And I think is just a big time pickup. And then DJ McKinney out of Colorado. I believe he's the one grad transfer in this group. Don't quote me on that one. But he comes in as a multi-year starter at Colorado and projects to be the next version of Devontae Smith and of the other nickel transfers that Notre Dame's gotten here in recent years to kind of plug and play. Think of a Clark that we've had in years past, or a Rod Hurd that's really stepped into that nickel corner position. That is what they project of DJ McKinney. I think he's going to have a hard time winning a job against a guy like Mark Zachary or Dallas Golden, but certainly a veteran guy, grad transfer. Expect him to compete for that starting role at nickel. And I think is, again, rounding out that position group where, yes, we're really strong on the outside with Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, but relying on a first-year starter certainly helps to have a ton of depth. We've certainly felt that this year, where when we had injuries at cornerback, we really struggled. We saw that against Texas A&M. We saw that against Miami. But when Devontae Smith and Leonard Moore were healthy, we were clicking on all cylinders. This is Freeman saying, look, I can't just have 3 lockdown corners. I need a room of 4, 5, 6 guys. I can't have an excuse like 2 years ago where, man, USC is running up and down the field on us because our corners are tired. We need to be able to have enough talent to rotate at that room. I think DJ McKinney and Jaden Sanders fully fill that box here for Freeman and the secondary to round out those 7. So let's talk about one more headline that Mike and I have hit on in this show before, when we've asked ourselves, what is the biggest thing holding back Notre Dame from winning a national title? And we said the admission office. And what did we mean by that? We were restricted to only get grad transfers. We could not go after undergraduate transfers in the portal unless if they were exceptional students from the likes of Navy, Northwestern, or Stanford. The only way to be an undergrad transfer is if you were on track to graduate from Notre Dame in 4 years with all of your credits transferring and in a major that you could hit the ground running. And it turns out, if you're a football player at Ohio State or Alabama or Colorado or Michigan, and you're an undergrad, you aren't taking a course load that puts you on track to graduate at Notre Dame in 4 years as an undergrad. And so we were really limited to the Riley Leonards of the world and the Sam Hartmans and the Jack Cohns, all grad transfers. Malachi Fields, grad transfer. Bo Collins, grad transfer. On down the list, every transfer we had coming in, without exception, was a grad transfer with 1 year of eligibility left. Now, I have a similar concern in high school, where high school recruits, we've opened up a lot of flexibility, but you still got to be taking like 2 advanced math courses, 1 advanced science course, 1 foreign language class, and it just rules out some high school recruits. The admission office is finally bringing in some flexibility here. So we had 7 transfers this year. 6 are underclassmen with multiple years of eligibility remaining. 6 of 7. In the last 5 years, we had 29 transfers, and just 2 had multiple years of eligibility. They were from Navy and Northwestern. 27 of the 29 were grad transfers with just 1 year of eligibility remaining. So before this, over 90% of our transfers were grad transfers. This year, just 1 of 7, about 15%, are grad transfers. The other 85%, we've completely flipped the ratio. The other 85% are underclassmen with multiple years of, or undergraduates with multiple years of eligibility left. Pete Sampson, shout out Pete. He always does such a great job covering the stuff that no one else wants to get into, but really drives a program. He talked about it. He, was covering an interview with the beat writers, and Marcus Freeman quoted his relationship with the head of the admission office and how great of a job they're doing, how collaborative the conversations are, and how they've really reached something that works for both sides and still adheres to Notre Dame's academic standards. But it is clear there's a change there, either from the credits they're accepting from institutions or giving them more flexibility to say, hey, you may not be on track to graduate in 4 years, but if you can come in with a plan, whether that's make up credit hours, summer classes, graduate in 5 years, whatever it might be, we are now being more flexible. And how incredibly important is that? It's everything in football. Justin Fields transferred after his freshman year. Quinn Ewers transferred after his freshman year. Joe Burrow transferred after his freshman year. All of these guys wound up being All-American quarterbacks, leading their teams to the playoff, leading their teams to national championships in the case of Joe Burrow. Like, academics have to still matter in some sense. I get it. But let's be real about what this is. This is now a paid quasi-professional sport. And if we want to be serious about winning, we have to be realistic with admissions. We have to have flexibility if students want to take 5 or 6 years to get their degrees. And this is now opening up a place where we've said it now. I've said it multiple times on this show. We are stealing blue chip talent from Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan. And it's in big part because of the admission office at Notre Dame. Huge shout out. I don't know the ins and outs. They're not publishing it. They're never going to. They're never going to sit down and do an interview and say, here's the new credit rules. But I think this is a massive game changer. And then it really feels like Freeman is still doing this in a distinctly Notre Dame way. A group of kids that by all accounts are still academically curious. They want to get a good degree at Notre Dame. They want to be, student athletes as best defined in this current crazy NIL landscape. But first and foremost, as an administration, to finally demonstrate we are willing to relax admission standards to win a national championship in football. Thank you. Thank you for reaching this point in the process. It's amazing progress. We love it as fans following this team. And now I got to be a little greedy. If you're doing it on graduate transfers, can we start doing it with the high school recruits too? Can we start fully putting our resources towards going after 5 stars and those top 100 recruits that historically may not have gotten a look at Notre Dame because of whatever classes they're taking in high school? Can we also be looking past that and reaching for more flexibility? I hope we are. I think we are. It's behind a veil, a curtain that we're never going to see the ins and outs. But at least from the outside looking in, it looks like Freeman is really working through the political bureaucracy of Notre Dame and getting to a point where we can maintain what makes Notre Dame special while going after the premier football talent to put this university in a position to go win a national championship. So that's my big takeaway on the transfer portal. Massive haul, especially because of what it says about Notre Dame's change in our stance towards recruiting out of the portal, demonstrating the university is finally all in on being serious to go win a title in 2026, 2027. Until we speak again, Mike and I will be back to look ahead to the roster coming back next year. We will also hand out season grades on the 10-2 campaign in 2025. Until we talk again, Gyrish.